Okay, guys, time to start packing. Let's go. Okay. Oh, we gotta find the purple pants. Purple pants. These are shoes. They are.
Okay, Lorelai.
Oh, no, was that them? Oh, you found them. Yes. All right.
Time to switch from this. Okay.
No, but it's the last one.
Lorelai, it's time to switch from this. You'll have more time to finish this video at 9 or 9:30. Okay. Hey, can we please not get all stompy and upset?
I'm not.
Okay, I really think you understand this. I didn't say that, period. But if you speak Portuguese and you're white, you're more likely to be from Portugal than Brazil. People are stereotype you too. That was the point of this video, I think you missed it. While you were getting set. Style, no. Style, shush. You can go up and be with Lorelai. Yes, you can. We got a form to get leads. We've got this sweater that I need to finally finish for the person that paid me a lot of money for it. All right. Make a couple videos, and we're going to read this lovely stack of books. We've got The Secret Practice that we're reporting. We've got some really good pride books. Worthy by Queering the American Dream by Dr. Angela Yarber. Worthy by Chris Davis. Beyond Belief, Stories of Women from Cults, and Cults and Our Myths, which we are also reading and recording. These recordings will be found on my Patreon for subscribers, and you will be able to watch those anytime you like. So, first, I'm going to start with this TikTok reply. Here we go again with AA. It gave me a lot of good skills. I think the fact that so many people are able to take the good from it and move on negates it from being a cult. At its most extreme, at its worst, just a religion. Okay, let's talk about that. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I wrote a book about growing up in the Children of God religious Schmeck's cult and then going into the U.S. Army cult and the parallels between. I have a master's degree from Harvard in organizational psychology, and now I'm writing a book called The Culting of America, where we are looking at AA amongst other things. So, first of all, this idea that if it gives you good skills or if it does good for the world, it can't be a cult. This is one of the things people tell themselves because nobody likes to think that they have been conned. So people tell themselves, oh no, it gave me these good skills. Great. Children of God pedophile cult gave me great skills. You know, I'm here every day making money just talking to the internet. Skill I got from growing up in a cult. Didn't make it a good group. Okay. And cults do lots of charity work. Cults are almost always involved in some sort of political work or some sort of social justice work because this gives them several important things. It lets them recruit easily. It lets them collect money. And most importantly, it becomes the transcendent mission that is step 3, if I remember to put it there, on my cult list, right? So, and the transcendent mission is what draws people to the cult. So the Children of God specifically liked to brag that they did more charity work than the Salvation Army. Didn't know the Salvation Army was also a giant cult, but that is the way it was. And what I say in my book is they were so busy saving the children of the world that they forgot to save the children of God. So, of course, the people at the top know that the charity work or the political maneuvering or whatever it is a con, right? But the rank and file people do not know that. The rank and file people believe that they are doing good. And this, I got another comment that was like, oh, the Catholic Church can't be a cult because it's the easiest thing to leave, to come and go. What other cult is fine with you showing up twice a year? Like every single cult has a broad base of people who have just barely tipped their toes into it. And those people will typically go to their graves saying that the cult was a good thing. The cult relies on that for the whitewashing, right? So the people out there who have had good experiences. Finally, this person is trying to make the argument, is every AA person does, that, oh, it's just the unit. It just depends what meeting you're at. Sorry, the unit, that's the parallel to the military, former Captain Mestenek of the U.S. Army. And like, no, that's not the case. There's a reason that every cult scholar is warning about 12-step programs right now. Some are better than others. Absolutely. That's true in any large group that breaks into units. But coercive control is what AA is built on. AA, like any other cult, did not start out to get people sober. It started out so that Bill W. could build a following die very wealthy, and lie about how he got sober. So just like any other cult, it was a con from the beginning. It is built on coercive control and junk science. It uses the same tactics as cults to make you think you're having breakthroughs. And finally, by the way, cults are great at getting people sober. Children of God got 10,000 people sober, and then they went and built one of the world's worst schmex cults. Scientology still does it today. It's easy to get sober if you give up absolutely everything else. The US Army does this successfully every time they deploy soldiers. And then the easiest thing to not do is not drink for a year when you're over there in a completely different environment where nobody else is drinking and everyone is devoted to the mission all the time. The problem being, you don't ever get over your addiction. You just addict yourself onto the group. 50 years later, the Children of God has mostly fallen apart, and all of those old fogies that joined the cult are back on their vices. And finally, you simply can't say that AA does a lot of good and helps a lot of people like he does in another comment, because there's no data. And if we can't use anecdotes to say that it is negative and that it harms more people than it helps, you can't say that it helps more people than it harms, because you don't have the data. No organization is above scrutiny. There are no sacred cows. I have about 150 other videos on AA. If you're seeing this on TikTok, feel free to check it out. Forgot I had one more thing to say about AA. The people are always like, well, it worked for me. I'm glad you got yours. Like, I never understand this response. We're talking about how it's awful, how it hurts people. People can see the responses of people who've been hurt by it. And people are like, well, work for me, work for my guy. Why do I care if it's toxic for everyone else? It's so like white feminism, white supremacy, just peak, ugh. Like, ugh. Thank you for loving my book. Okay, just save it. I can't make all my videos on TikTok anymore. Okay. Let's make sure we got that one. Someone just got me wake up fighting about AA. Yeah, no, as one does. Where are my photos? Style. Bro. Oh, come on. Okay. I'm trying to make sure that video got saved. And I don't think it did. I'm not understanding why. Oh, mine just barks no matter what. So just to be clear, it's always so interesting what people think like makes something not a cult. And this like, What we do good is one of them. And it's just like, there's nothing that makes you automatically not a cult except not using coercive control against your members. Like, that's the only thing. If you're doing it, if you're using a model built on junk science, you're not automatically not a cult, no matter how much good you do. It just is not the way it works in every, well, I said that part already, but there's also there's no individual experience that you can have with a group that you can just look at that experience and be like, yeah, that wasn't a cult. Like, you should always assume that you were just not read on. That's the military way of saying you have access to these secrets because your job needs you to have access to them. If other people are saying that a group was cult-like and negative and coercive, almost certainly, you just didn't experience that. Very, very rarely I find, is it just bad apples in a group? It's always systemic. There's a reason that culture puts up with that kind of toxic BS. And every single time it is because it's very culty. Oh, Rachel Bernstein. Well, you said psychotherapist, so I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I think Rachel Bernstein is excellent. Also not a cult survivor as far as I know. And this is a very interesting thing with the majority of the scholars. There's some very good scholars that weren't ever in cults, and then the majority of the scholars were in cults. So like this book that I'm reading, that I'm recording now, Cults in Our Midst, is written by Margaret Singer, not to be confused with Margaret Sanger of Birth Control and White Supremacy. And she was not in a cult. She just studied all this stuff. And then Janu Lalich, who joined a cult and then became this big cult scholar. But as far as I know, there aren't too many who have grown up in them and then chosen to stay and like work in this field, of course, because why would you? Unless your whole goal in life is to just knit and read books for the rest of your life, then, you would. Okay, now we're going to do some Pride books. Oh, by the way, I just ordered this book. I haven't listened to it, but it's called Devil of the Deep. It's written by a Haitian immigrant, and it is, her name is Valencia Jean Francois, and it's like pirates, cults, mermaids. I got it on audiobook. I haven't started listening to it yet, but I'm very excited. And I have this whole rant that so this is written obviously by a Black woman. I found it from a creator who was like, y'all say you like Black art, prove it. And it's really, really important. And I think about this a lot because the reason that I have a book, I'm going to just make this a video. So when we say that we like Black art and care about Black artists, we need to prove this, right? By buying their work. So I'm very, very conscious that the reason I have a book is because straight presenting white army captain is considered the every woman voice, right? Everyone can read my book and relate to it. If I had been gay, if I had been Black or any other skin color, I would have been considered a niche voice, and I maybe wouldn't have gotten the book deal at all, or I probably would have gotten a much smaller book deal without the full power of a giant publishing company behind it. Now, what can we do about that? It's very frustrating. We don't make the publishing industry. There's all these things we can say. What we can do about it is buy the books of people that are not considered the every woman voice. So I just ordered this book called The Devil of the Deep by a Haitian immigrant. And I found it from another creator on TikTok, and I haven't started listening to it yet, but I'm very excited. But I just wanted to like jump on here to remind people like white women buying books or other kinds of art is what makes something mainstream. And I'm generally talking about women here because my forthcoming podcast is called Hey White Women, but also because what men and women buy in books tend to be very different. So if we wanted this book, Devil of the Deep, to go mainstream, like another pirate book I just read, we need to buy it. Like we need to go out and buy it in mass, because anything that white women go out and buy in large numbers is going to be considered mainstream. The primary example of this is the Joy Luck Club. So don't just say that you support people of color, like go out and buy the books, because that's what changes things. I have to keep count today, so this one's going to be difficult. Oh, I have one more thing to make a video about. All right, so today is the second day that we are recording Hey White Woman, and it's a podcast that I am starting with a woman who calls herself White Woman Whisperer. Style. Come here. Sit. Shh. And we are going to be deconstructing the cult of white supremacy out loud and in public, because just because you've had the crack in the brainwashing and you have physically and mentally left the cult, it doesn't mean that you don't still have a whole nother decade of deprogramming to do. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so I separately have this little ceramic bowl of pearls. And it's a long story as to why I have it. Basically, I was making something with pearls. These are the leftovers. They're not incredibly expensive. You can buy a string of pearls for, jewelry making. It is like the most ASMR thing ever. These pearls in the ceramic bowl. And like, it's not just beads. Because when I put these other super cool beads that my daughter gave me, like, not the same. So anyway, so I'm telling my husband, like, oh my God, this is great. I just put these here because I didn't know what else to do with them, but now I'm going to keep them here forever. And he just like calms me down. He just me goes, oh, so you're literally clutching your pearls. Oh my God, this is amazing. This is going to be one of the things on the Hey White Woman podcast when, she says something or I realize something that's like going to be difficult for white women to handle. We're going to just like, she has this thing about sitting in your hut of humility, and we're just going to clutch our pearls and we're going to go sit in our huts of humility and think about it and believe Black women and get that crap out of our life. Anyways, these are my pearls that I shall be clutching. If you stare too long into racism stares too long into you. I don't know what you mean by that. Sounds like trying to be deep, but really trying to write off what we're saying. I could have getting that wrong. Some forms of feminism on the sundry. Well, white feminism is just literally white women trying to own the plantation. Definitely problematic. Okay. We're going to start with Worthy. It's going to be funny. I can already tell. Stop reporting me, peeps. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Worthy, the Memoir of an Ex-Mormon Lesbian by Chris Davis. Chapter 1, Cold Baths All My Life. I grew up in a big city in the central eastern part of Maine that's considered a small town by worldly standards. Bangor bustled with a couple of shopping malls, movie theaters, an international airport, and plenty of restaurants and car dealerships. I realize I need to count my stitches or I can't keep going. Don't tell the men that we're not counting stitches all the time when we knit, because that's one of the reasons that they are so overwhelmed by my awesomeness. It's the home of Stephen King, and yes, I served him pizza once at Papa Gambino's. My childhood, although not without moments of chaos and confusion, was largely idyllic. My summer days were spent outside riding bikes and playing kickball in bare feet. Yes, I drank from the garden hose. Yes, I sold lemonade. And yes, I rode the rides at the Bangor State Fair every year. My summer nights were balmy, and I often fell asleep to the sounds of the harness racing bugle announcing the beginning of heats. And they're off. All of my childhood memories include Stephen, my younger brother. Stephen was a go-with-the-flow kind of kid. He never complained unless there were onions in his supper. And even then, he demonstrated his protest simply by pushing the onions to the side of his plate and not eating them. Once, as a teen, he was served broccoli at a friend's house. He disliked this vegetable so much that he quickly ate it to get it out of the way. His friend's mother saw that he gobbled it up and assumed that he enjoyed it, gave him an extra helping. Yes, the accommodating Stephen thanked this mother and ate the extra broccoli. He was so polite that he didn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Stephen was also a hyperactive kid who had difficulty controlling his impulses. Consequently, he spent a lot of time being grounded. Whenever Mom took away his bike or sent him to his bedroom for punishment, he merely said, "Okay, let me know when I can have it back," or "I'll just play in my room until the time is up." There was no punishment he couldn't wait out. He endured deprivation with grace and dignity, much to my mother's frustration. This was why it struck us as funny when he was asked to complain about something at school, and he came out with the confession that he disliked bath time. It seemed so random and insignificant to us, but it was the biggest worry on his mind at school that day. In elementary school, Stephen brought home a writing assignment about something that made him unhappy, in which he had written the line, "Cold baths all my life." Mom was shocked to find out that he hated going second at bath time and that her little boy had been suffering because the water was too cold by the time it was his turn to bathe. To this day, when someone complains, Mom and I grin at each other and say, "Cold baths all my life." Stephen had a peculiar way of waving goodbye when he was little. His arm extended toward you with his fingers hanging down and shifting slowly left and right. It was captured in our Super 8 Silent Home movies, the Christmas that Santa brought us, a cardboard Mickey Mouse clubhouse. The clubhouse was the perfect combo of the toy and the box it came in, which is so appealing to small children. Stephen's little smiling face peered out the cardboard cutout window into the bright light of the camera as he proudly wore Mickey ears and grinned like a child alive with the joy of receiving gifts on Christmas morning should be. It has become a tradition and an understood acknowledgement of our love to salute each other with his wave every time Mom and I part. It makes us both happy and sad, but mostly grateful for the good memories. I would like to wait until I'm 16 to be baptized so I can make a better decision. When I was 9, that's enough. You know her. She lives here.
Hey, Mom, when can I turn the TV back on?
After 9:30?
No.
When I was 9, I was invited to commit my eternal soul to the church. What 9-year-old can comprehend such a promise? I had no idea what baptism was or what it meant. My father, who wasn't religious himself, but was staunchly against Mormonism, had coached me on what to say if I was ever asked this question. He worried that I would lose my freedom and deny myself life's pleasures if I committed myself to this high-demand religion. My parents were recently divorced, and my mother, who was a convert, held full custody, so she decided it was time for me to join her church, regardless of my father's protests. I rehearsed my answer to the bishop in his office after he popped the magic question, "Do you want to be baptized?" After my statement, he rephrased the question, "But would you like to be baptized at some point when you feel it's right, wouldn't you?" I answered yes, and he looked relieved. "And you like coming to church, and you feel good here, right?" Yes. A few weeks later, in the cool of November, as we drove in the car on a road that I loved for the canopy the leafy trees made overhead, my mother informed me that we were on our way to my baptism. I felt confused because I knew what I had told the bishop. He knew I wanted to wait. Did he misunderstand me? Did my mother insist anyway? Was this just another thing I was too young to comprehend? I trusted the adults in my life, but I was confused when they contradicted each other. When we got to the church building, I was told to put on a plain, white, starched dress. There were 2 other girls there for the same reason, and I recognized them from my children's Sunday school visits. They were a year younger than I was, and they looked nervous too. Spectators sang hymns accompanied by the upright piano, and speakers gave talks that I can only assume were appropriate to the occasion, though I couldn't concentrate on what they were saying. Then the moment came. The faux wood vinyl accordion curtains were pulled back to reveal a baptismal font full of water. There was a soaking tub in the church. The first girl joined her father in the font. No one was alarmed when he said a prayer and dunked her under the water's surface. No one but me. I was mesmerized by the spectacle and had to be asked twice to come forward for my turn. The tepid tap water soaked my lace-trimmed socks and the hem of my borrowed white dress as I stood on the first step. I saw a man coming down the stairs on the other side, and I recognized him as someone who came to our house occasionally to visit. My dress ballooned as I descended into the tub, and I pushed it down, willing it to stay that way. The man held my wrist and instructed me to plug my nose. Everything went silent for a second or two that I was under the water. When it was over, I felt relieved, until one of the official male priesthood witnesses announced that I hadn't been 100% immersed and had to repeat the process. Shivering, with my dress stuck to my pre-adolescent form, I waited for the prayer once again and submitted to the second dunking. All I felt was wet. Cold baths all my life. This was no miracle. This was a trick. Again, I trusted the adults in my life, but my trust was misplaced. Many times over the years, teachers and leaders informed me that I had to remain faithful to the church because of the obedience I promised at my baptism. I was completely ignorant that I was making an eternal covenant with God, yet I was committed forever to the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Last year, when I was considering this memory and anticipating writing about it, I asked my mother about the interview I had with the bishop. I wanted to know whether he told her the speech I had prepared and delivered about wanting to wait. She had no idea what I was talking about. Apparently, the bishop never told her. He took it on himself to approve my baptism without dual parental consent, and even in light of my discomfort with the idea. Even at 9 years old, I was being groomed by the church. This began my lifelong bewilderment with those in positions of power ignoring my feelings. It was then that I began to realize I couldn't trust the adults in my life. But there was one adult I could always rely on, and that was my Grammy Sullivan. Read more about her on another video.
While you take a break tonight.
Can you turn it off, please?
No.
Girlfriend. We have a deal. Please don't fight with me about
But
this.
Mom, I don't want to have to find it all over again.
Lorelai.
Please.
Damn it, I just said your name. Hey, turn off the television and please go do something with yourself until 9:30.
Like
I'm
what?
not going to fight about this. You can just go to camp all summer and not have any days off. Lorelai, please go upstairs to your stuff.
Why can't I just stay down here?
Okay, next time you ask me to take you to the pool or a play date, the answer is no.
No.
I'm working. I need you to leave me my space.
I was just asking a question. Gee.
Yeah, this is the answer to the question. This is why you can't stay down here. Because you don't respect the fact that I'm working.
But I will.
No.
I'm bringing it the hairbrush in my later.
Yeah, perfect. I'm back. Right, this is my scarf again that I made yesterday. Very excited about it. Okay. Sorry about that. Summer is fun. Now an 8-year-old is very angry. I definitely thought I read the whole preface yesterday, but I didn't. And I need glasses. I think I don't have any glasses that match my outfit. Stop. We're going to have green. Somebody turned on the television, which can't happen in my house, so that's probably why it started cracking up. And then I paused it. So that's probably also what you were experiencing. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Queering the American Dream by Dr. Reverend Angela Yarber. This is part of the preface. The green plastic bin. You see, I began painting these intrepid guides in 2008, giving traditional iconography a folk feminist twist by painting revolutionary women otherwise overlooked in my spiritual tradition. She's traveling around the country with her wife and their toddler, and she's writing about women, feminist queer women in religious history. In 1999, I was hunkered in a Russian Orthodox church as the American embassy was bombed. This word is just out of place. In 1999, I was hunkered in a Russian Orthodox church in Moscow as the American embassy was bombed. Gazing at the brooding, whitewashed faces of male saints glaring back at me, I kept asking myself, where are all the women? In 2005, as I rode a camel up to Mount Sinai to experience the sensory overload of St. Catherine's Monastery, which housed the oldest collection of Christian icons in the world, I could only find 2 women crammed among them. Where are all the women? With my eyes fixed upon thousands of golden statues at the Temple of Thousand Buddhas in Thailand a few years later, not one woman could be found. And I continued to ask, where are all the women? This question, where are all the women, continues to guide much of my painting and writing, as I canonize marginalized women into the subversive sisterhood of saints. In the paintings, their hearts occupy the bulk of the canvas, and I accompany every painting with the cry of each woman's heart, scrawled poetically across the canvas. When we left for our travels, I had sold most of my nearly 100 icons. The remaining few, 15 to be exact, were waiting to be hung in an exhibit. I couldn't bear to leave them in storage, so I carefully placed all the icons in an enormous green plastic bin that would occupy far too much space in our camper during our travels. In all our wanderings, the hearts of these folk feminist icons remained, bearing truth and courage, audacity and compassion from the green plastic bin wedged in our storage compartment. Because these women did revolutionary things that upset the status quo during their times on Earth, they stir impulses in me. Alongside their stories and mine, you will find the ways in which their virtues evoke social justice today. Whether it's a contemporary issue, such as environmental racism, or a timely event, such as the Pulse massacre, I do not hold back my rage or longing. Nor did they. Accordingly, each chapter contains 3 intersecting stories. 1, my queer family's tribulations. 2, a historical woman's life who paved the way. And 3, a mythological woman's legacy who paved the way. All this is simply too much for a green plastic bin to hold, so it spilled out over these pages and filled this book. Historian Gerda Lerner claimed, "Women's history is the primary tool for women's emancipation. One cannot tell the stories of these women without also telling the stories of liberation they incite today." Nope, didn't forget my microphone. That's what you get on the phone. But I will turn up the sound. Maybe that will help. Where am I? Okay. More than mere soapboxes or miles traveled, these are the cries of their heart and mine. My words may wander from time to time, but within all the wandering stories is the collective heartbeat of revolutionary women, longing for emancipation. I invite this longing to guide you. It is the stories of these subversive sister saints that kept me going. Whether it was traversing jaw-dropping landscapes with my wife and toddler, or wailing in despair as my brother's addiction spiraled, these women, and the woman I call my wife, upheld me. And I believe their stories can uphold you, too. Hidden in the crevices of our canons at best, strategically erased at worst, theirs are the revolutionary stories we all deserve to hear. If we only listen, we just may queer the American dream. Queer. With unspoken stories in mind, it's worth a brief pause to make a little note about language. I will often refer to us as my queer little family, or discussing queering dreams. And I imagine this will have plenty of folks, straight and queer alike, wondering what exactly I mean by this. When I employ this word, I mean 3 overlapping things. First, I use queer as an umbrella term for the LGBTQIA+ community. This avoids the inevitable alphabet soup, forgetting or misplacing a letter in the acronym, and it includes both sexuality and gender identity without excluding either. Second, the use of the term queer draws from the academic discipline of queer theory, which seeks to dismantle hierarchical binaries such as male/female, gay/straight, man/woman, by exploring the interstitial space between binaries. Third, the use of queer also reclaims the once derogatory term by hearkening back to the dictionary definition of queer, which is to intentionally transgress or subvert. Spirituality, sexuality, and gender identity is queer insomuch as it intentionally transgresses oppressive boundaries or limitations used to exclude the LGBTQIA plus community. Of course, all these usages are much more nuanced, but these three understandings give you a general idea of what I mean when referring to myself or my family. Queer is both something you can be and something you can do. To queer something, the American dream perhaps, is to subvert it, turn it on its head, question, and dismantle it. Feminist writer Adrienne Rich claims, whatever is unnamed, undepicted in images, whatever is misnamed as something else, made difficult to come by, whatever is buried in the memory by the collapse of meaning under an inadequate or lying language, this will become not only unspoken, but unspeakable. Unnamed, disenfranchised grief, undepicted images of revolutionary women from history and myth, stories buried by the lying language of patriarchy, and the difficult to come by queer traveling family losing our faith across the American landscape will no longer remain unspoken. For in these words and stories, in this book, these women speak again. I will no longer tolerate inadequate language. My queer little family muddled our way around the country, experiencing grief, joy, fear, longing, love, and the impacts of addiction. 15 revolutionary women icons squeezed into a green plastic bin were our faithful travel companions. Together, we pilgrimaged a country whose landscape caused our jaws to routinely drop in wonder, yet whose policies routinely failed us. And we found what the people of this country are somewhere in between. Causing our wandering hearts to oscillate between wondrous beauty and sheer heartbreak. Disclaimer. Perhaps you're thinking, wow, how'd they do it? And where do I sign up? Or maybe, great, another story about a white woman traveling to find herself. Who is she to teach about these revolutionary women, many of whom are women of color? Perhaps, were they trying to commit career suicide? Even, who the hell raises their toddler in a camper gallivanting all over the country? Believe me when I say that we asked all these questions too, and still do to some extent. There's no denying the privilege that accompanies this adventure. Is traveling throughout the United States as a queer couple, 2 women and a toddler, easy and safe? Not exactly, particularly amidst an election cycle that routinely demonized queers and ignored the safety of women. Did we do everything on a tiny budget, living simply and making a lot of sacrifices? Yes. Did we work really hard to make it happen? Sure. But our white skin and tremendous education also afforded us a lot of privileges unavailable to many others. As we traveled and planned and explored, we remained acutely aware of this, hoping to balance our sincere desire to wander with our responsibility and calling to make the world a more just and beautiful place for all. It's possible that if everyone committed to creating a more just and beautiful world for all people, people like my little brother wouldn't turn to ash. And when it comes to sharing the stories of revolutionary women from history and myth, almost all of whom have different cultural backgrounds than I do, here is where I land. The lives, legends, and legacies of these forerunners have been altogether ignored and excluded in most history books, stained glass windows, iconography, and public histories. As a queer feminist and scholar, it is my responsibility to shout their stories from the rooftops. Because their stories affect social change, evoke revolution, and embolden today's women to keep striving and thriving. Simultaneously, I acknowledge that their stories are not my own. As a cis white woman, there are elements of their struggle which I can never grasp. It is my hope that glimpses into their narratives will spark you to learn more. Read their books, research their lives, follow in their footsteps. Not just mine. As a queer white feminist, I am called to shine an excavating light on the women of color who have paved the way. May my book allow this light to guide you to follow their revolutionary lead. If you do, together, we just may queer the American dream. She's also Mexican. She's just also white. Now let's read. Just all the introductions. Yeah, we're going to read the introduction anyway. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Beyond Belief, The Secret Lives of Women in Extreme Religions. Introduction. Reflections from the editors Cami Ostman and Susan Tive. We met in a memoir writing class taught by author Laura Kalpakan in the fall of 2006. Susan was writing about her years spent in Orthodox Judaism, her difficult divorce, and the disorientation of transitioning out of living an Orthodox life. Cami was writing about how her journey to run a marathon on every continent was helping her find her way after a divorce and a profound change in her relationship with God. As we shared our respective stories, both in class and over coffee or wine outside of class, we discovered surprising parallels in our lives. Both of us had chosen to enter religious communities we weren't raised in. We had each adopted faiths that asked us to eschew many personal freedoms and choices most non-religious women take for granted. Though Cami was not asked to cover her head or stop wearing pants, as Susan was, she was asked to believe that women shouldn't teach men in church and that her husband should be her head. Comparing notes further, we realized that despite the differences in our respective religious practices, we could empathize with each other's difficulties reintegrating into the secular world and shared the doubts and second guessing of our decisions to leave. We understood the self-blame and guilt that comes with leaving strict religion behind. We experienced similar struggles surviving the wistful, nostalgic, and sometimes heart-wrenching emotions that arise from missing familiar community and ritual. The more we talked, the more we began to ask ourselves, why did we choose to join such restrictive religious practices? Even more compellingly, we wanted to explore both why did we stay so long and why was it so hard to leave? After all, although we experienced intense emotional and psychological pressure from friends and family to stay, we were not obligated by fear of violence as some women around the world are. What did we gain by staying? What kept us in, even through years of serious misgivings? Now I got my knitting pattern. Good news. I just have to knit 10 straight rows. Now I just have to find my camera again. I don't think it's the headphones, but we can try that.
Are you live right now?
Yes. You gonna ask me something?
Yeah, what time is she going to Winnie?
I don't know. It hasn't been worked out yet. But she's supposed to be doing her own thing until 9:30.
She is.
As we formulated more questions and explored our own answers to them, we began to wonder about all the other women who, like us, had lived or were living through their own version of this story and were grappling with many of the same experiences, emotions, and questions. As our friendship with each other taught us, women living life inside extreme religions have much in common, despite their differences of practice and belief. I would say it doesn't just have to be religion. Sharing our stories with one another through writing and in conversation helped each of us to feel less isolated, learn from our experiences, and become willing to dig deeper. Realizing that the commonalities of our lives within extreme religion far outweighed the differences of our particular paths inspired us to widen the conversation. We decided to share our stories and give other women the opportunity to tell theirs. Thus, the seeds of Beyond Belief, the secret lives of women in extreme religions, were first sown. Far and wide, we flung our net, asking writers the same core questions we had asked ourselves. Why did you, a modern-day liberated woman, join a religion that restricted your autonomy? What did you experience inside? What compelled you to stay? What compelled you to leave? How did you leave? What do you miss? How do you make sense of the world without your faith or with an altered understanding of your faith? As Beyond Belief began to take shape, the one question we were asked most often by contributors was, what's your working definition of extreme? It is true that the word extreme is an extreme word. For some of our atheist friends, any religion that espouses a belief in any kind of supreme being is extreme. Yet for those who live inside orthodoxy or fundamentalism, what they live is not extreme to them at all. It is quite normal and sensible. We agreed that we would let women who resonated with the term extreme define it for themselves. As editors, it's not our place to pretend we have an objective, unbiased definition of what is extreme that we can apply like a measuring stick to other people's experiences. What we do know is that looking back on what we put ourselves through at an earlier time, we now see our religious commitments as extreme in comparison to our current lives. We hope you, the reader, will keep an open mind to the stories contained in Beyond Belief and employ empathy as you read, even if certain writers' beliefs don't resonate with your own. Another question we encountered when we made our call for submissions was, I was born into a family that practices a religion, this religion. Can I still submit a story? Our answer at first was no, but we changed our minds. Although we originally hoped to find women like us who chose to enter their faiths in adolescence or adulthood, we came to understand that, except for some women who risk their lives to leave their religion behind, even those who were born into a particular faith must choose to stay in it for at least some period of time, often because the consequences of leaving were, while not deadly, quite huge. I don't know. I think we can say the ones that left as teenagers never chose to stay in the religion, though. Finally, potential contributors asked us, I've left a conservative branch of religion, but I still attend a more liberal church/synagogue/congregation. Does my experience count as leaving? Again, our answer is yes. We understand firsthand that faith and spirituality can be in flux. Where we are today may not be where we'll be tomorrow. And so it's best not to judge as definitive where other people happen to be on their spiritual journeys at any given moment. In fact, it's precisely because we do not consider ourselves judges of other people's experience that we asked our contributors to write slice of life stories rather than more informative or opinionated essays. It's not our intention to refute or belittle religion. On the contrary, we, as editors, wanted to spark a conversation about the commonalities of women's experiences in restrictive religions. The fact that most of the writers included in Beyond Belief have since left or greatly altered their religious practices is a reflection of our longing to hear from those who share the trajectory of our journeys, and should not be read as a suggestion that women should leave. This book is entirely about sharing experiences in the way women do, by telling stories to one another. In Beyond Belief, you will find appreciation and gratitude for experiences of faith side by side with deep resentment and anger. Some writers are still grappling to make sense of their lives, both in and out of extreme religion, while others are absolutely clear about how to understand their histories. We have made every effort to include women from as wide a range of religious backgrounds as possible. And while we couldn't include every single religion out there, we are proud of the quality and diversity of writing that has come together to form Beyond Belief. It is our hope that you'll see yourself, your friends, and even a few of the people who irritate you in these pages, and that your curiosity will be piqued and your compassion stimulated. We hope that in reading these stories, you will become inspired to enter into open-ended conversations, such as the ones we strive to nurture in our own lives. And this book, I think, is going to be really important because it puts a bunch of stories right next to each other. And that, of course, is how we begin to see the patterns. Everybody here now? I'm hoping. Today, for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Daniella's book, Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God cult and going into the U.S. Army. This is Chapter 8, The End of the World as We Know It, Part 2. We learned that Grandpa had died 6 months earlier, but Mama Maria, who would be the family's new unquestioned leader, had decided to wait until the fast to reveal it. Someone in Mama Maria's home received a revelation from God, a vision of Grandpa being taken up to heaven in a chariot and passing his mantle down to Mama Maria. The message was clear. We had a new leader, and she had the full backing and total power of the prophet. The vision had also explained that all family members had, with Grandpa's passing, received a piece of his gift of prophecy. All adults, and even the children, could begin receiving messages and instructions directly from Jesus. We were all prophets now, I guessed. Starting at that year's fast, Mama Maria revealed the new governing charter of the family. It was the first time in our history that rules had ever been written down. Never before had there been a clearly defined process for membership, expectations, or guaranteed rights and responsibilities in quite this way. On the surface, the new rules seemed so clear that nobody could argue with their details. Several big things impacted us kids. Sitting cross-legged on the floor later that day, after everyone had calmed down, I tried to focus on what Auntie Dora was saying and not fiddle with the dusty pink carpet fibers. She started by outlining the discipline protocols, naming sections and numbers that made all the adults nod carefully. I couldn't figure out what she was talking about and examined the faces of Dorothea, Abigail, and little Mary, but they didn't seem to know either. Then she said the words that got my full attention. If you are older than 6, you can't receive any more than 6 swats as a punishment. It will be even less for the younger children and toddlers. I snuck a glance at the musician corner where all the most popular punishment uncles were, but they all sat there calmly, as if they'd already heard this before. Clearing her throat, Auntie Dora said, "Your parents have the right to be involved in any discipline you receive, and nobody can deny that." She smiled at us almost warmly. Isn't Mama Maria so radical? The room nodded. I tried to imagine my meek mother, always in the spirit, marching up and intervening on an uncle or auntie who was dragging me off to a beating somewhere. It was a nice idea, but I knew it would never happen. We will no longer be using silence restrictions on the very young children, Auntie Dora continued, and nobody should be hanging signs around your neck anymore. I thought of all the times I've been placed on silence restriction, usually for talking too much out of turn. We won't be using long periods of isolation, Auntie Dora's voice broke through my reverie. And children under 12 will always have a right to ask to see their parents at any time. She seemed to look me in the eyes as she said this, in a way that made me wonder if she knew about Uncle Jerry, about the things he did when he got me alone. I wondered how many other kids he did it to. I wondered how many Uncle Jerrys there were in our communes around the world. Timeouts will cease at 3 hours for older children, 10 years old on down. I wouldn't be gone for days anymore, but 3 hours was still a lot of time. 3 hours felt like 10 when I was alone in a room with nothing but walls and my own skin to pick at. Auntie Dora explained the new official family position. Children had a right to an education. Any kind of traditional learning had always been secondary to physical labor in the communes. But now, regular schooling would become an official requirement, and classroom time would replace previously scheduled work hours. Our homeschooling experiment would become the standard education for every child. I did the math and realized Grandpa had already been dead when we did our testing months earlier. So that had been the plan all along, with our commune serving as guinea pigs. As Auntie Dora explained the new labor rules, I thought of all the work we did, from physical labor to childcare, to acting and performing on videos and in the streets, to pounding the pavement selling those same videos and literature to raise money for the adults who didn't work jobs. I didn't know how our way of life could survive without that, and I didn't believe for a second that any of it would change. They'd find a way around the regulations. They'd have to. Some of the youngest children are going to start going to the doctor, Auntie Dora continued, because Jesus had told Mama Maria that it's important babies and toddlers be treated by systemite doctors. At this, I heard audible gasps from my friends around the room. But when I looked around, the adults all had mostly painted the usual reverent looks back on their faces. All of you will have at least one visit to a doctor and dentist in the next year. That way, if the police do come here, we'll be able to show them your medical records. But we'll still know that Jesus is the one who does your real healing, right? Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Lord. We all parroted the expected response. Auntie Dora's explanation made sense. Systemite doctors were still wrong, but sometimes we had to do a little evil in order to do the greater good of protecting the family. My mind floated back to my visit to the hospital years ago as I ran my fingers over the scar on my palm. I shivered as I remembered the feeling of the needle peeling back the thick black thread, pulling the thick black thread through my skin. I never wanted to see another systemite medical professional again. Auntie Dora paused and scanned the room slowly, as if she was trying to take a moment to look each and every one of us in the eye. Finally, she cleared her throat and said, "It's important for us to remember that Mama Maria is not saying Grandpa was wrong. The Lord told Grandpa one thing a long time ago, and he's given Mama a different version for our current world. We don't question the teaching from when Grandpa was our prophet. He still talks to Mama and to us, too, if we want, every day from heaven." But I wasn't so sure. The fact that Auntie Dora had to point this out struck me as suspect. I looked around the room and saw everyone nodding. Did no one else see how strange this was? That Grandpa died and all of a sudden a bunch of his teachings were deemed wrong? If we weren't following his teachings, if we weren't following him, exactly who and what were we following? When Auntie Dora continued, she told us the biggest changes of all, the rules about sex. Mama Maria feels that some of our ideas about sex have been taken out of context and have been poorly applied by some bad apples in our homes. My heart seemed to stop beating. Was she going to name him? I knew better than to look at Uncle Jerry directly, but I could see him out of the corner of my eye. The look on his face didn't change a bit. He sat there, unconcerned, as if he had no clue he was one of the bad apples Auntie Dora was talking about. Anyone caught having sex with a minor will be excommunicated from the family. Nobody under the age of 16 is to be engaging in full sex, though the junior end time teens and junior teens will be allowed some sexual touching. She looked straight at our group. That means we don't play games about making love anymore, okay, kids? We all nodded obediently. I didn't understand what I was feeling. In the short time it took Auntie Dora to explain the rules of the new charter, it felt like everything in my life was about to change. And yet, there I was, in the same place, surrounded by the same people. I felt weightless, floating, like someone had lifted a 50-pound bag of rice off my shoulders I hadn't even known was there. But there was something else, a fear that I'd be caught, that hands would reach up and grab me and drag me back, down to where I belonged. I heard only good news, but I knew that most of the time, good news turned out to be too good to be true. But still, for the first time in my life, someone had said and put down in writing what I had always felt, but never had the words to express. It was wrong for grown men to have sex with little girls. There were so many different kinds of punishments and so many people who did them, but there was a clear line in my head that placed them into categories, even if I couldn't articulate at the time exactly what those categories were. I knew that I liked Dad and hated Uncle Jerry. Even though they both punished me a lot, they were different. Dad was one of the good ones, as we called them, locked away in my imaginary jeweled box, what I knew I could never speak. Uncle Jerry was a bad man, one whose wife stood before us, spelling out the punishments he'd never face. I felt a cautious hope that it would be harder for people to hurt me quite so badly as before. If Uncle Jerry needed witnesses, he couldn't drag me down into the basement for punishment. If Abel or Titus tried to make me play another game, I could threaten to tell on them for sexual touching, the same way they'd used to threaten to tell on me for not being a Bible woman willing to serve the men. If I didn't touch them like they wanted. I had the words for it, and that was a power in itself. Sitting there on the floor, listening to all the ways my life was about to change, I looked at my sister Mary, 6.5 at the time. I didn't know if anyone had gotten to her yet, but I wanted to believe she'd been spared so far, and that the new charter meant no one would ever get the chance to hurt her the way they'd hurt me. I wanted to run out of there. It was all too much. I didn't want to keep seeing Uncle Jerry out of the corner of my eye as he sat there with a serene look on his face, as if he was innocent, as if none of this troubled him a bit. I felt a huge relief, but I also felt like I needed to be alone with all this information, like it needed time to settle. What else could Auntie Dora possibly say? The room stayed quiet and still and serious. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked. Auntie Dora smiled and looked at us kids with something like a twinkle in her eye. I told Mama Maria about the libraries my girls have been running with classic novels and how much you kids enjoy reading them. She thinks that's a good lesson for other homes, and it will be especially powerful if the police raid any of us again. It'll be in a mama letter soon. We'll be adding more books to our library. Isn't that exciting? I tried not to smile too hard at this news. If they knew we wanted something too much, they'd take it away. We're going to have more movies, too, with a new ministry who will decide which ones are healthy for us to watch. I forced myself to remain calm, grabbing my ankles so I wouldn't accidentally uncross my legs and jump up. I missed more Friday movies than I saw because of punishments. I didn't expect that to change, but my mind soared as I imagined a time when I wouldn't have to hide my love of reading. I glanced over at Mom, hoping we'd get to do some reading together soon like we did on the weekends. Of good books, not just Mo letters and Dad's comics. When Auntie Dora was done, we prayed, thanking God for Grandpa and now for Mama Maria as his new mouthpiece. Usually, my mind wandered during prayer time, but this was different. I was not faking my gratitude. That day, as I stretched my arms toward the sky in worship, I felt every bit of those hallelujahs. As life inside the commune adjusted to the new charter, a dark side emerged that I don't think any family members would have or could have been capable of foreseeing. I celebrated that 6 would become the maximum number of swats a child my age could receive with a paddle, because it meant that I wouldn't be hit 10 or even 20 times with long, hard pieces of wood, or even worse, swinging wire fly swatters. But it quickly became evident that I would always get hit 6 times for any infraction, large or small, where in the past some punishments might have just been a swat or 2. Now, nobody would ever question whether hitting a small child 6 times was too much, because it said so in the charter. For better or worse, the rules and regulations that it contained became our gospel truth. The same sentences and rules that codified certain freedoms also gave up others. We were given the right to ask clarifying questions of any part of our religious doctrines, which seemed to mean that no other child would be punished like I had been from that game of telephone gone wrong, and so many other times. But we were also responsible for doing it in a way that didn't spread doubt or schism among the members of the group, which meant any leader could still decide that your method, question, or tone was out of the spirit. Embedded in almost every guaranteed right was sneaky, coded language that still made it harder for a group member to think on their own, act in their own defense, or make decisions in their own best interests. The charter was the truth, just like the Bible, but that also meant someone in power could always interpret things differently, and their word would always matter more. It's funny, when we were writing this, and my co-writers were like, would you have known the word schism at the age of 8? I was like, oh, absolutely. And by the way, if you were upset at somebody's tone, you were never an ally in the first place. Stop trying to tell people what tone they are allowed to protest you in. Okay. Now, we're going to have to say goodbye to YouTube. Goodbye.